Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by husky, hairy, huggable homos who love film to sometimes dish up a little bit of movie news. Although this week I think we're gonna let the movie news rest a little bit because we've got some VOD releases we want to catch up with. We haven't had a chance to necessarily talk about these in full force on the show, so we're excited to have a little bit of time to bring them up, talk them through, maybe get you excited about some new films to see. We're also going to be reviewing a new film currently in theaters that you can go check out called Windriver, which is stirring up a lot of potential Oscar buzz and controversy, ? We're going to get to that. We will talk it through. But before we get to any of that wonderful awesomeness I just called out, let me introduce you to something even better. Someone's even better. Jim Pugliafico, welcome to the show. Glad to have you back, babe.
The awesomeness. Is that what we are?
I think so.
Will and I. Yeah. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We're bringing the awesome.
There you go. And opening up a can of Whoop Awesome is Will Lindis. Welcome, Will.
Hey, you awesome possums. Glad to be back with you to talk movies again this week.
Awesome greeting, Will.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other awesome phraseology I can fit in there. So we'll just say it was awesome.
Yeah, we'll just let it, we'll just pretend we riffed for another 30 jokes, but move forward instead.
There we go. We won't quite go to played out Family Guy levels of taking the joke too far, but close, almost just shy of that line.
But we will fight a chicken this episode. It's happening.
Indeed. Anyway, well, guys, glad to be back with you on the show. I want to give a shout out to those of you who are joining us live for this show. I realize we're not reviewing a big blockbuster film right now, but that's because we're kind of, beyond blockbuster season. We're not quite to Oscar season quite yet. So we're sort of in this weird, limbo, wasteland, I guess, between the two seasons. But it's a good thing that we're getting some movies coming out to fill the gaps a little bit. We're going to talk a bit about how a film like Windriver maybe helps to bridge that gap a little bit. I'm anxious to see what both of you think about that movie. Before we do that, though, I think it's time we maybe catch up with a few films we've been meaning to see, we've kind of wanted to talk about, but we just haven't had a chance to fit into the show yet. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm ready for it. This is going to be good.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, movie releases right now are a little thin on big popular movies or titles. We could tell because when we go to the Cineplex these days, the parking spaces that we get are a lot closer to the door. There aren't the crowd attracting movies right now, but that doesn't mean there aren't great movies out there, as we're gonna find out with our feature review today. But and that's a little bit tipping my hat, I guess. Yeah. But
is it a cowboy hat?
But it's a cowboy hat that's dusted with snow. How's that?
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And as the movie landscape is changing, right? More and more great stuff is popping up on VOD or video on demand across many services. And we're going to talk about a few of our picks. So I'm excited.
All right. Awesome. Well, then let's dive right in. Jim, I don't think we have any kind of VOD extreme
we don't even have a theme song. And you guys want tailored bumpers for each.
Are we going to do this bad morning radio shock jocks? Because that's an option. Give her the D. VOD. Things like that.
We could. I
would say we shouldn't.
I was listening to another podcast, friends of the show, the Green Screen guys, Green Screen of Death, and they were joking around with what they were going to do. And one of them was just have some shitty pop music with death metal voice over it, VOD.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, I know we don't have a theme song yet.
Won't do that.
People keep promising to make one for us. We've had several musicians on the show at this point, and they all say, maybe we'll come up with a theme song for you guys. But yet, almost 5 years later, no such theme song yet. So if you're listening right now, you're musically inclined, you love the show, and we hope you do. If you would like to donate your musical talents to creating a theme song, or maybe some fun musical bumpers, maybe we'd even, like, I don't know, throw some movie tickets your way or something, and like include your name in every episode. Wouldn't you love to hear? Welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. That was our theme song, brought to you by
Blankety blank.
Insert your name.
Right.
Be pretty awesome, right? Maybe not. I don't know. In any event, hey, look, we got a whole show to do, and it's time we make that transition. Even though we don't have a bumper, babe, maybe you'll do something interesting, something creative. Maybe we'll just dive right in. I don't know. It's up to you. But Will, why don't you go ahead and kick us off here? We're catching up with some films we haven't really had a chance to talk about on the show yet. What film are you bringing to the table this week?
Yeah, so I'm very excited to talk about this one because this one is actually doing one of those. The film I'm about to talk about is doing a theatrical run right now, but it's like event only in certain cities. Like, it's not even like a limited release. It's like, but it's not quite a festival release either. It's like, we're going to be in Austin for one day. We're going to be in Sacramento for one day. But it's also released at the exact same time on Amazon and on iTunes. You can VOD rent Dave Made a Maze right now. Dave Made a Maze is one of the damn weirdest movies I have ever seen. It is about this woman comes home to her apartment and she finds that her boyfriend has made this little cardboard maze in the living room of the apartment. And we're talking like maybe a 5 foot by 4 foot like set of cubes on the ground. And he's like, hey, I'm stuck in here. And she's like, well, okay, well, just stand up or just crawl back out. He's like, no, it's much bigger in here. And she gets a bunch of her friends over, different people, like, got one of her friends who's a filmmaker and one's like who's his best friend and all those people. And they go in, and as soon as they go inside, there's this giant multi-room labyrinth everything is completely practically made out of cardboard, whether it be the walls, the traps. There's a monster in there. Everything is made practically out of cardboard and paper. It is a design dream. It's also an interesting little look at sort of what happens when an artist's obsession sort of becomes he consumes too much of his life and he's not able to sort of like set it down and kind of cultivate the relationships. That's sort of like the metaphor and the allegory here. But it's just a fun movie about these people trapped in this weird cardboard labyrinth trying to escape. It's called Dave Made a Maze. I kind of love it.
Well, I can't really offer anything. I haven't seen this one yet. This is a fairly new release, right? This one isn't one that, like you said, it really didn't get a theatrical release. Even really, like you said, even really much in festivals or in a lot of festivals. It just kind of popped up on VOD. And which VOD outlets?
I did Amazon, but it should be on, I believe it's on iTunes as well. Okay. But yeah, like this one, like even if you go on like the website for it, because I knew this one was coming out and I kept going, well, I live in Austin, I'll probably get it, if not opening weekend, like a few weeks in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I was starting to hear about it and like nothing was showing up on the listings. And yeah, sure enough, like it just has these kind of event screenings in certain cities. It hasn't even made it to where it's like a straight up limited release. So hard to track down in person unless you just happen to luck into one of those areas where it's playing. But fortunately, we can stream it right to our television boxes.
Yeah, my app that sometimes tells me where these movies can be found says, as you said, Amazon also says Voodoo, VUDU.
Okay, yeah.
Anybody has
there Voodoo. You go.
Yeah. So, yeah, I did see a trailer for this one because I'm a trailer watcher. I go out, I go out and I look for new trailers that are dropped just because that kind of sets the hook on movies that I'm either interested in or just, maybe I'll catch up with it. And this one that looked, like you said, very interesting, very different, about this guy that builds this, what looks to me like a kid's fort. You know what I mean? Like we used to build out of refrigerator boxes and stuff. And it almost seemed like there was the movie was maybe kind of more of a metaphor type movie, and has some kind of life message associated with the stuff that you're seeing on the screen. It might look silly, but you know.
So I'm confused, and I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this like he made a cardboard maze on the floor, but when you go in it, you magically get transported to like a giant cardboard maze somewhere? Or is it literally just adults like crawling around through like boxes on the
More of the former. It's like, I'm almost think TARDIS, I guess.
TARDIS.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Gotcha.
Like, it's this really tiny thing that is like, this is a small apartment, and it maybe covers half of the floor of this apartment living room, which isn't massive. And they have to crawl to get inside this little thing where it's just like a little opening with like cloth draped over it. And then when they go inside, they're just standing up in this room with maybe like a 10-foot tall ceiling, going like, well, what the hell is this? So yeah, very much think TARDIS. This is a comedy. It's you know, so it's kind of, it's funny. It's got sort of like a lot of the comedy is based on the weird situation and kind of the way the characters respond to it. It's also got anyone who's a fan of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer may remember Adam Bush. He's a guy that played Warren in some of the seasons. He was one of the major characters in one of the seasons. Mm-hmm. He's one of the leads in this, as is James Urbaniak, who is the voice actor of like most of the characters on the Venture Brothers cartoon, if you watch that. So not necessarily like big A-list names, but like the people they got are very talented at connecting a joke.
All right. Awesome. Well, very cool. Sounds like it could be fun to check out. Jim, what have you got this week?
I caught up with 2 horror movies on VOD that were actually released last year. I think a couple of these, or both of these, were fantastic first releases. One was The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which I'm not going to talk about, but is worth catching up with if you see it out there. The other one is called, the one I want to talk about is called The Eyes of My Mother. And this is by first-time director Nicholas Pesce. I think he may be an Italian director, but the movie is not an Italian movie. It is, you know, it's not really subtitled. It's mostly in English, and it feels like a very American story. It seems to be set maybe in America. It's not super clear, but this is a super creepy and strange film about, I'll just read the thing. It says, in their secluded farmhouse, a mother, formerly a surgeon, teaches her daughter, Francesca, to understand anatomy and be unfazed by death. One afternoon, a visitor to their home shatters the idyll of Francesca's family life, deeply traumatizing her, but also awakening unique curiosities. Her loneliness and scarred nature converge years later when her longing to connect with the world around her takes on a dark form. So this movie goes into some places that were really shocking for me. Kind of made my skin crawl, kind of shocking. Not jump scare, not traditional jump scares or boogeyman and the dark stuff, just scenes of like authentic creepiness, some body horror, and like baseless evil and violence, shot in a very stark and non-Hollywood way. I don't know how much of a release this got in theaters. It's available on Netflix Instant right now. So if you've got a Netflix account, or if you have a subscription you borrow, a friend's account, which I don't condone, but yet if you can, turn off the lights and check this one out. No big names in this movie, but the lead actress is Kika Magales, is very, very good. And, like sometimes with these first-time directors, it could be a crapshoot, but like we saw with Robert Eggers in The Witch a couple years ago, you knew right away that this director had a vision, or has a vision and a style that you want to see what they can do next when they get past their first movie. And this is definitely one I'm going to be watching for his next movie. But this one's called The Eyes of My Mother. Check it. Horror fans really should check this out.
Yeah, this one's really neat because it's got such a great deliberate pace to it, but it doesn't actually fall into like slow burn territory because it comes in at like a really sharp like hour and 15 minutes or so. Like it's all things considered, it's not a long movie. So like if this were an hour and 45, like I'd say, okay, slow burn fans, watch out. But like, no, this doesn't have an opportunity to do that because it gets to the things it needs to do, but it doesn't feel like it has to rush to do so. I love that, just like that just kind of precision of pacing.
Yep. Yeah. I know, Brad, you didn't get to see this one yet. I'm not sure if I'll ever get to revisit this one again. Some movies are just, I mean, The Witch I did watch again, but some movies are creepy and they stay with you and you don't feel like you have to watch them again. So, but yeah, check this one out. If you got Netflix, The Eyes of My Mother.
There you go. Well, hey, I want to give a quick shout out to Steve in the chat who says, Jim, your synopsis already scares me. By the way, hello, everybody. Hey, Steve, glad to have you join us.
Hey,
you
Steve.
know, what's cool about doing segments like this, and I know we'll do plugs later, you know, that part of the show where we're like, hey, there's this really cool thing we think you should check out. But being able to do a segment like this, I feel like there's so many movies like always coming out. It's like, you know, plugs, we can quickly mention something at the end, but it's nice to kind of like take a breath, be able to sit back and talk it through a little bit rather than just like, hey, go do this. So even though I haven't seen the film yet, Jim, you're right. Definitely great to hear you and Will talk about it. And who knows, maybe I'll put our Netflix subscription to use. Check it out when I have time, although God knows when that will be, because my list of things to watch is like as long as my arm too. But, we'll have to see. Speaking of things on my list to watch, though, I recently, and by recently I mean today, got a chance to catch up with a film that came out on VOD last week that I've really, really been looking forward to seeing. That being Batman and Harley Quinn, the new animated film from DC. I was a huge, huge fan of Batman the Animated Series back when it ran from 92 to 95. So, wow, that makes me feel really old, knowing that this show was 25 years ago when it premiered. But the great thing about Batman and Harley Quinn is it's sort of a return to that Batman the Animated Series universe, which I loved so much. Whether it's officially part of the Batman the Animated Series canon or not is sort of a question mark. Actually, one of the co-creators of the series, Bruce Timm, is the writer for this film, and he says he considers Batman and Harley Quinn to be part of that universe, but Warner Brothers gets to make those calls. I guess he does not, as amazing as he is. But some great things about this film and some not so great things about this film. I'll try and talk a little bit spoiler free, but I loved having Kevin Conroy back as Batman and Lauren Lester as Nightwing. He played Robin on the original series and then became Nightwing during that series run. So the dynamic duo is back together for this film. Of course, working with Bruce Timm as well. Some really cool things in terms of coming back to that Batman the Animated Series art style. It's always sort of this like mishmash of technology of like 1930s style cars and like the fucking futuristic Batmobile. You have like old school televisions, but like Batman and Nightwing are like using smartphones. You know, you've got like these old clunky looking airplanes and like the futuristic Batwing. So like it's just a really cool art style, the way that it's done. Really interesting look at sort of like, if you look at some of the landscapes too, one of the big things about the animated series was Gotham always had sort of this like foggy crimson sky at night, and it was really striking, like with lightning going on in the background. Very visually cool, and I was glad to see a lot of those elements brought in here. It was also neat kind of seeing Harley Quinn, who's voiced by a new actress in this film, kind of seeing what's going on with her character since the animated series. I don't want to spoil too much, but she's just out of jail. It's in the trailer. I feel like I can say that. And she's working in a Hooters-like restaurant called Super Babes.
Oh, wow.
And she's cosplaying herself as a waitress for all these rapey guys that are like ordering chicken wings and trying to touch her butt. And so it's just kind of a crazy setup. She gets roped into the world of Batman and Nightwing because they need her help to track down Poison Ivy, who's once again up to no good. But it's really interesting to see sort of like where she's at, like post Joker, like post Life of Crime, and now sort of getting drawn back in here. Also really loved the dynamic, even though we've got a new Harley Quinn, it's still Kevin Conroy under the cowl, so to speak. And just like in the original show, he's sort of having to corral Harley Quinn, like manipulate her emotions to get her to do the things that need to be done. And, you know, I've always thought that was a really, really interesting dynamic on the original show. So it's great to kind of see it played out here. As much as I love those aspects, though, there are some things that just really did not work for me. Poison Ivy continues to be a joke of a villain, and her motivations in this film, just like with the original series, are just as fucking Earth Day ridiculous as they ever are. Maybe that's part of the charm. I don't know. There's musical numbers in like a villain bar, which was fucking terrible. I was like,
2 in a row.
Right. I'm like, can I just fast forward through this shit? Like, do we really need this? Like, total filler. And I think part of the problem is the film can't decide if it's like a dark drama with like dark comedy undertones, or if it's like, you know, a dark comedy with like dramatic undertones. And so the tonal feel is just all over the fucking place. And it's not helped by the fact that a lot of the comedy is just bad. There are some lines that made me laugh out loud, but there's others. At one point, there's a fart joke. Batman, Harley Quinn, and fart jokes didn't really work so well for me, unfortunately. And this movie, you know, kudos to Bruce Timm for wanting to do something different, wanting to stretch out, since this movie is probably targeted a little more toward the adult audience. You get a lot more adult themes. The problem is, even though they're using profanity, words like shit and ass, and some overt sexuality, it's really rapey in some cases. And I feel a little uncomfortable with the idea of like parents who are like, oh my God, I love Batman the Animated Series, I'm going to let my kid watch this movie without screening it first, because I'll tell you, I think it's going to give young boys some bad ideas about good touch, bad touch with their female friends. So overall, I liked it, but unfortunately it wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be.
Yeah, I watched this with you, or at least most of it. I agree with everything you said. I did dig the animation style. I would have preferred this one stay darker in tone and more sinister in tone, instead of and I'm okay with inserting some dark comedy into very dark, gritty drama. But when you have that mishmash of like silliness, like teenage boy silliness. This movie to me is targeted toward like young, you know, like 12-year-old to 15 to 16-year-old boys or something, because there's so much T&A in this movie. Like, I don't really need to see up Harley Quinn's butt crack. You know what I mean? Like, it's really weird. It was really, really strange. A pretty mediocre plot. I mean, nothing. I mean, this is the same kind of plot you'd see in Johnny Quest or something like that, just with superheroes. Yeah, I don't know. Didn't ring bells for me, other than I did like the style, and I would like to see something really well done in this style. You know, a good story with a consistent tone. That's what I'd want to see out of it. But
yeah, if you dug some of that art style and some of the dark tonal dynamics, babe, you might check out the first couple of episodes of Batman the Animated Series. I have it. I bought it. I've been meaning to go back and rewatch some of it. You might kind of dig it a little bit. Will, did you watch the Batman the Animated Series at all growing up?
Oh, I did, yeah. And while there was like, I remember there being like both a tonal and kind of an art design like drop off, I think in season 3. Those first 2 seasons are some of the best animation, at least definitely of that era. But I would probably put it in the conversation of like, what are some of my favorite like animated series of all time? This probably kind of rounds out like the bottom part of the top 10. You know, like I think those first 2 seasons were quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Steve in chat says that he saw it and was kind of disappointed, kind of how I felt when I saw The Killing Joke. And I also saw The Killing Joke. Look at me watching 2 animated Batman movies. What the hell is wrong with me? But I don't know. This one made The Killing Joke look like it could contend for some kind of award. I mean, seriously. That's The Killing Joke, although I didn't really dig that either, I enjoyed much more than this.
Well, I think The Killing Joke had much more of even though the Joker was part of it, had a much more of a like serious tone to it. Like there were little bits of comedy sprinkled in, but it wasn't trying to like be a comedy. I knew I was in trouble when like the opening sequence for this movie is like a comically animated like emoji Batman and Harley like running after each other with hammers. I was like, fuck, what are we getting into? So
and even anyway, that might have been more fun if like, I feel like when you have style, like a very strong stylistic choice, you either need to steer into it or avoid it completely. But if they do that type of opening and then shift into like more Bruce Timmey type stuff, but like with fart jokes, like it sounds like that film doesn't know what it wanted to be.
Yeah. It's tonally all over the place, and unfortunately, I think it's trying to be all these different things, and it fails to be them all because it just can't focus on one or two and run with it. So, I'm still glad I checked it out. I'm glad I watched it, and you may dig it. You know, if you're into boobies and ass, you know, on a woman, that may be something you enjoy seeing in this film as well. Otherwise, you know, I don't know. Maybe rent it, maybe catch it on Netflix someday when it's there, but you may not want to rush out and buy it by any means. All right. So, that's 3 VOD picks we've talked about. How are you guys feeling? Well, actually, Will, you're holding up additional fingers.
No, that's not additional. I was just counting them down. 1, 2, 3. 3 VODs.
There you go. 3 VOD. That rhymes, actually, and I'm okay with that. What do you guys think? Is this a segment that we should maybe do more of?
Pick 3 VOD? I think that's...
Yeah.
That's
D3. 3D. So, there's something there.
We can make something out of that.
How about VO3?
VO3. There we go. See, we've just birthed
3D.
We have just birthed a new segment. I like it. No, but I do like it from the standpoint of like there are so many movies that we don't get a chance to talk about because it could be a super great movie that just happens to open up against like the new Avengers movie. And it's like that one, you know, is not going to get talked about. We're going to talk about the Avengers one. You know, that's just you know, that's the way it works. And so this segment here gives us the opportunity to double back to some of those that fell through the cracks or that went up against a blockbuster or that we're just discovering for the first time. So I like this segment a lot.
Yeah, I you know, I think it's a great idea, and we talk about movies that we just can't fit them in with our main reviews in some weeks. Where, you know, it's either feast or famine, right? In feast weeks, we get too many movies that we can't cover them, so they slip by. And then, yeah, doubling back to catch them in VOD or movies that we didn't expect to be worthy, you know, to be worth talking about, like one we're going to talk about pretty soon, that kind of bubbles to the surface and kind of comes out of nowhere and surprises us. So, yeah, I like the segment. I would love to keep it going.
Well, then we'll have to get some additional VO3 going in the coming weeks and months. Guys, believe it or not, we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary in December, which is just a few months away at this point.
We're a toddler.
Which means the new Star Wars movie is not very far away, thank goodness. And Christmas is not far away, which is a little scary to me because my head, I feel like it was just December and now it's 3 months away. So that's a little weird, but that's another topic. Hey, how about we review our main feature film of this week? Are you guys ready for that?
Yes.
Totally ready.
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Given your enthusiastic reactions and foreshadowing, I have a feeling I know where you guys are going to come down on this movie. But we're going to talk it through anyway. Before we talk about Windriver, though, just a quick explanation for anyone who may be new to the show. If you've not seen Windriver yet, that's okay. You know why? Because we're going to talk about it spoiler free. We're going to give you our initial impressions. We'll give you a fair warning before we bust open a can of spoilers. So don't worry if you've not seen it yet. If it would help to have an outside opinion, if you're on the fence, if you've never fucking heard about it and you're like, what is this movie? Why do you guys care enough to talk about it? We'll tell you. So feel free to hang with us after Jim lovingly puts the trailer into the audio for those of you listening on digital tape delay to hear, to maybe refresh your memory. For those of you who are watching live, and hey, JP, glad to have you with us. JP says the killing joke was fucking awful. Oh, goodness. Man, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, JP. Thanks for saying hi, putting that in the chat. In any event, guys, here we go. Our discussion of Windriver. All right, so Jim, do us a favor, if you don't mind, for anyone not familiar with this movie, give us just sort of the basic premise and then your impressions. Is this worth going to see in theaters right now as we're sort of in this barren stretch between blockbuster season and Oscar season? Is this more of like a rental or VOD pick? Should you skip it? What do you think?
I will do just that. I will attempt to do just that. How's that? So Windriver, brand new movie. This movie, I think, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year. And I kind of follow the news about film festivals. I don't dig too deep into them, but I know that this film generated a bit of buzz at the Sundance Film Festival. And then it kind of disappeared for a while until its release this month. And I'm going to give I'll give the little IMDb version of the synopsis generally. No real spoilers in here. And then we'll go into the discussion. But Jeremy Renner, who we know, right, is a veteran fish and wildlife game tracker who teams up to assist an FBI agent who's out of her element to investigate a murder of a young woman that has occurred on the Windriver Native American reservation. So there you go. There's your IMDb plot synopsis. All of that is in the trailer. None of that is spoilery. Didn't quite know what to expect from this film going in, although the trailer looked interesting enough, setting up the premise of this, the central murder mystery. But what caught my interest was hearing that Taylor Sheridan wrote and directed this movie. I became very interested in that because he wrote what probably was the best script of any movie last year, at least in my opinion, for Hell or High Water. That's a film we talked about on the show. We all loved it, I think. He also wrote Sicario, which was a big movie that got a lot of Oscar buzz in 2015. Another great film, another great screenplay. This guy seems like every year he's knocking out a great story. And I wanted to see if he could do it again with this one. And, what I like about his writing is that so far it's like he writes like grounded and gritty stories with fully fleshed out and presented characters, and also stories that are efficiently tell you the story without a ton of like exposition, right? It happens in front of you. You see it. You can see it through the characters. So they're not telling you a lot in this movie. And that's exactly the kind of story we get, and it's great in Windriver. Unfortunately, nobody's talking about this movie kind of the same way that happened with Hell or High Water until it kind of caught fire and got a little bit of buzz. And that's a shame because I think this movie, Windriver, deserves to be seen. I think people should see it. I don't know if the premise or the title just isn't exciting to people and they don't go see it, or people are, getting back from summer vacations and they're just not into movies. I love this movie. It's probably going to be on my list, at least as of now, for some of the best movies of the year. Jeremy Renner is solid in this movie. Understated character, but certainly not in the background understated. He's strong, understated. He's a fully fleshed out character with a backstory. Elizabeth Olsen is also very good here. Is this Hawkeye and the Scarlet Witch? Is that what I'm seeing here? Are they
exactly what you're seeing here?
Is that
it
what
is
I'm seeing?
indeed.
Like,
I mean, she wasn't all like in this movie, but like, you know.
And yeah, I know. And you know, all those times I bitch about when great actors have to go into these roles in superhero movies and become these kind of iconic characters. It's kind of like putting them in a I don't know, in a mold, I guess. And then when you see them in movies like this where they're allowed to become real characters, it's like stunning to see the acting that Olsen and Renner do in this movie. You know, also credit to Sheridan and the casting director to tell what is a story centered around a Native American reservation, Native American people with Native and First Nations actors in this film, a lot of them. The standout for me being Gil Birmingham, who also, by the way, was the deputy in Hell or High Water. He's the murdered girl's father, Martin. And I think the emotional core of this movie, and I think, you know, he's a perfect choice for that. The guy is an amazing actor, and there's so many Native actors that you don't get a chance to see in mainstream movies very much. Graham Greene is another one that's in this. You see him a lot. He's a character actor we see in a lot of movies. He's kind of the exception. But that's just scratching the surface of what's in this movie and the talent that's making this movie. Also, beautiful photography in this movie, cinematography, and editing. I think the editing fits well with the storytelling, and we'll talk about some of that in spoilers. Like I said, not many people are talking about this movie. I wish there were. Get out and see it while you can, and then let's talk about it. This is a great movie. I recommend it 100%.
So we got a big, strong recommend from Jim. For me, I remember, I think, seeing the trailer for this movie. I think the only thing I remember about the trailer, though, was like the woman like running barefoot through the snow, and then them like talking about frostbite or something. The trailer didn't particularly stick with me for some reason. So, Jim, when you wanted to go see this movie, so context, we had just gotten back from a camping trip up in the mountains, up on Mount Lemmon here in Tucson. And all I wanted was to take a shower and wash the filth and grime off of me. And Jim's like, let's go see a movie. And I'm like, no, please.
By the way, I probably say that at least like 3 times a day. So,
and he says it exactly like that too. Let's go see a movie.
So I'm just like, no, I just want to shower and relax. Like, do we have to? But you know what? Jim often says that, and I end up going to see the movie, and I come out of it like, wow, what a great movie that was. And this certainly was no exception. Jim, I don't want to go on and on because, Will, you're probably going to touch on some of these things as well. Just to talk about a couple different things. Yes, the acting was phenomenal. I want to talk a little bit about the cinematography for this movie for a second. Jim, I know you laugh every time I mention that I grew up on a farm, but it's a core part of my personality, so it comes up a lot. And one of the things that I think this movie captures really well is just the desolation of winter. And it does it even better than Game of Thrones. Sorry, Game of Thrones. Just the desolation of winter and snow and this landscape. Like, obviously, this was Wyoming or Montana?
I think it was Colorado. I'm not sure.
Was it Colorado? Wyoming. I think it was Wyoming. Okay, it was Wyoming.
Wyoming.
So obviously Michigan, where I grew up, is a little different than Wyoming. But I mean, you have these like, you know, large expanses of like open land where, you know, it's just fucking snowing and snowing and snowing. It doesn't stop snowing. It's cold. And then all of a sudden the snow ceases. The sky is bright blue. Everything is like crystal clear and crisp. And it's like this off and on sputter. And even though you may have a town nestled in the snow somewhere, even though you may have a highway, the snow was there before people were, and the snow will be there after all the people are gone. The landscape doesn't fucking care about you. And so having this drama set sort of in this landscape, it's just it's really captivating for me to sort of see it play out on this stage of snow and desolation, because, you know, even the you know, like the police, you know, in this film, There are only a few, right? And there's the politics of like Bureau of Land Management versus like the actual police versus the FBI and how all that works. And it's like you see human beings like going out there and like strutting their stuff out on this stage, and it's almost like the land itself is a character here. And we'll talk a little bit more about it in spoilers, but I think there's a really sort of interesting metaphor about like the snow and the desolation sort of like swallowing and consuming you, and sort of like the powerful emotions of grief kind of doing the same thing. So I'm kind of anxious to talk about that a little bit. But you know, as movies that I was not excited to see go, this one really blew me away. And I really think, you know, obviously Oscar season is coming up. I don't know where my top 10 is going to be, you know, once we get past that. But this is definitely in my top 5 of the year, at least so far. This movie just made me feel so many different things. Like I was bawling at some points. Like I was laughing, not necessarily like because it's a comedy. It's certainly not by any stretch of the word. But, you know, some of these characters just have relationships together. They have kind of this humor with each other that is believable. And it almost feels like they use humor to work their way through some of the grief. And I felt like that was particularly powerful, especially between the main character that Jeremy Renner plays and then the Gil Birmingham character, Martin. That friendship, to me, I just think is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen on screen. Like two men, two straight guys, ostensibly. It's not like a bro friendship. It's just like a man-to-man kind of thing. And there's some affection there, you know what I mean? But it's not, it's not like gay affection or anything, but I just think it's really powerful to see these two like big, strong men sort of have this like tender affection for each other, which sounds a little bit weird when you see it on screen. Maybe you'll know more about what I'm talking about, but I think for me, there's just a lot of power in that.
It's a human connection. It's just a human connection, right?
Absolutely. Humans hurting and connecting,
right.
I think adds even more to that. So in any event, I think this is a phenomenal film. You definitely should go out and see it. Darren from Canada says hi in the chat. Hey, Darren, glad to have you with us. Welcome. So Will, what about you? So 2 big recommends at this point. Are you gonna veer away from the snowmobile tracks here, or are you gonna follow them?
I wouldn't dare, because this is one of my favorite movies of the year. I've been looking forward to this one because this one is written by Taylor Sheridan, who is on what I would consider to be a hell of a hot streak. This is a dude who kind of late 90s, early 2000s was just an actor. He was an actor. You know, he showed up in a bunch of television shows, I think most recently like Sons of Anarchy. And then he started doing some writing. And his first feature film that he wrote was Sicario, one of the best films of 2015. And then the next year, he puts out the script for Hell or High Water, one of the best scripts of 2016. And here we are, 2017, Windriver is one of the absolute best scripts. This is the first of his scripts that he's directed as well. So it was nice to see him take full ownership over this project, both behind the pen and behind the camera. And you can tell why he chose this particular subject, because this is one that he's quite passionate about. As the film touches on, and as we'll touch on, you know, there's definitely an epidemic of missing and murdered Native women who their disappearances are just not being reported, and their cases are not being followed up on. That's an actual thing that is actively happening in this country right now. And it's one of those things that is not being discussed and is not being talked about. And this film shines a huge spotlight on that. And as you mentioned, it does so with a great selection of actors, a couple of which, like you mentioned, Jeremy Renner, I think, is in top form here. He's a guy who I think can be, I think when he connects hard. He doesn't always connect with me, but in this case, I think he was pitch perfect. Elizabeth Olsen is one of those actresses who put her, like, if you tell me Elizabeth Olsen's in a movie, I will show up and see it. She's at that caliber for me right now. In fact, I just got done seeing her when we talked about it like 2 weeks ago. She is one of the two leads in Ingrid Goes West, and she's playing a completely different character in that one, like an avocado toast eating like Instagram pseudo celebrity. So it was nice seeing her like in the span of like a 2-week period play two very, very, very different roles. And of course, you mentioned Gil Birmingham, the kind of the heart of this film, and Graham Greene, who I think provides some of the grit of this film. I love those two actors so much, and just the fact that it's great that they cast Native and First Nation actors in this film, but that they picked these particular ones and that they had a chance to just knock it out of the park, like did so much for me. This also hits on a few other topics too. One of the things that is this is the big through line for the movie, of course, kind of the murder mystery and all of that going along with it. But we get a chance to see some of the other parts of tribal life that are that ring very true as well. From the insular / separated relationship that they have with other law enforcement, or even just geographical. Also, in one of the sections, this isn't getting too far in the rabbit hole, focuses very heavily on like drug addiction and how it impacts tribal. I spent a lot of time growing up in and around the Chickasaw tribe in Oklahoma, so not Arapaho, which is what we're dealing with here, but around the tribal headquarters. My uncle is the agricultural lead and a bow maker for the tribe. So I got to see a lot of these stories of like just the natives, like the Chickasaw locals, who were just being ravaged by alcohol addiction primarily, but also other harder drugs that were coming up too. It's awful. It is really awful, and I like that this film didn't veer around that. It didn't mysticize the native people, which I think is a problem you see a lot of times. Like where like the only parts of native culture that you tend to see are kind of like connections to the elements, or kind of the more like mystical elements. This film showed it's probably the most accurate and realistic representation of tribal life as I've seen it, that I've probably ever seen devoted to film. Cinematography is beautiful. The script packs punch. It packs character. It packs just so much. It made me think all the way home, just sort of like, like it made me think a lot about, I guess, just sort of the way that things can escalate, the way that things can go. And also just, it made me kind of ruminate on, just some of the things from my life. I love this movie. This is going to be in the top for me at the end of the year. It's playing in most theaters. Like, it's not necessarily like super wide, but it's out there. And I think part of that's because it's, Hell or High Water was really successful last year, and Jeremy Renner's in it. So, I mean, it's got some name power behind it. This is probably playing near you. You should absolutely go see it. It's one of the best films of the year. And I don't know where this one's going to fall in terms of like award season, because these types of films often don't like kind of scratch into some certain categories. But I have I think Sheridan's had 2 nominations. I could be wrong on that, for original screenplay. This one is probably, if nothing else, this one is a lock for a nomination / potential win for its script alone, if not other things as well. So yeah, go watch this movie.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say that, I don't know. It's going to be hard to say between now and the end of the year. There's a lot of movies to come out. And it could get swallowed up by bigger pictures, because it seems like it's going to be a small movie, even smaller than Hell or High Water. Hell or High Water kind of caught fire a little bit. I'm not sure this one's going to do that. I hope it does. I would love for more people to see this. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth a watch. I'm just going to say, before we get into spoilers, there's some tough stuff in this movie to watch that they put on screen, and the movie doesn't flinch from some things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit in spoilers. But just beware, it's really rough in spots.
Yeah, like the trigger warning on this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is a good movie to like take little kids to.
No, never.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, I know some people have, and as parents should make that choice, but it definitely deals with some very heavy and some very violent themes. So just kind of be aware of that. One thing I do want to say just real quick, there was an exchange happening on Facebook today that I thought was interesting. Someone else had seen this movie over the weekend and they were like, oh my gosh, Windriver, it's really good. And someone was like, well, I've never even heard of that movie. Like, I'm not going to go see it. And the original poster was like, well, weren't you the one that was just complaining that every movie that comes out is like a remake or a sequel? Like, why wouldn't you go see like an original movie? And the guy's like, well, if marketing can't get behind the movie, it must be shitty. So I'm not going to spend my money to see it.
That's bullshit. One, I've not heard it before. He literally just heard about it, right? Like,
Right.
Your friend was just telling you about it.
There's always the moment when you first hear about something. So
yeah,
that was it.
There was a time when none of the three of us have heard of this movie either. Now we have. So that's just the way information works. One day you don't have information, the other day you do. But past that, like that, I'm right there with you, Brad. That is one of my absolute pet peeves. Like, I hear that all the time from people like, they don't make movies like they used to. There's no good movies out. All the movies out are bad. And I'm looking through, and even if you take like the top grossing films off of the list entirely, I could probably come up with a good list of 50 movies that have come out this year alone that are worth watching. And it doesn't take a lot, like an encyclopedic knowledge of film or like a lot of digging. All it takes is just sort of looking at the Cineplex, just looking at the just like what's playing this weekend, looking at the descriptions and saying, oh yeah, that seems like something I'd be interested in seeing.
Oh, I recognize that awesome name or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're one of those folks, if you're tired of sequels and remakes and reboots and whatever, I mean, this is a great self-contained story. It's not necessarily a franchise movie. I mean, you should definitely give it a chance. And Bobby, hey, welcome. Glad to have you with us. All right. So, guys, how do we feel about moving on into spoiler territory at this point?
Yeah, definitely some things that we should talk about in spoilers.
All right. Well, now that I've gained your agreement, I'm in agreement with you. So let's go ahead and officially do it. We're going to move into spoilers for Windriver. If you've not seen Windriver yet, here's what we're going to say. We would love for you to stick with us, even if you don't mind, if you don't mind spoilers, that's cool. I like that. But I would say this movie is so good, you'd be doing yourself a disservice to continue listening live right now without seeing this movie. It's that good. So feel free, close out of the podcast window, go see the movie, circle back, listen again on audio or YouTube if you feel like it. If you want to continue listening, you do so at your own peril. That's up to you. Only you can decide for yourself what's acceptable and what's not. But I've awkwardly rambled enough to give people time to step away. If you're listening on digital tape delay, feel free to refer to the handy dandy time index in the show notes. Skip ahead to plugs. You don't want to miss those. But guys, spoilers are officially fair game. Where do you even want to start with this?
I will start with a couple of things. One is this movie, the script in this movie is so sharp that like when you think it's going down a certain path toward the end, it's not going that way. Like there is a scene at the end where things are coming to a head. Jeremy Renner is kind of on the heels of catching up with the rapist murderer guy, and you're like, I know what's gonna happen. As a matter of fact, we both leaned to each other and said, I know what's gonna happen. The mountain lion's gonna come out of a tree and get this guy, and it's gonna be, it's gonna be divine justice, right? And Jeremy Renner doesn't have to do anything. It's a perfect way to wrap it, but it doesn't. The movie takes it in a more realistic direction, and I love the movie for that, for subverting my expectations in that way. Also, I mentioned there are some tough scenes in this movie. You mentioned one of them. There's a scene at a drug house that, like, one of the most tense scenes I've seen in a long time with regard to law enforcement versus these guys who are kind of high on drugs and unpredictable stuff going on. And then there's a big scene later on, which, you know, we'll talk about it. This movie actually does depict the violent rape of a young woman, which is like really, really hard to watch, to sit there and watch what was going on and knowing, and worst of all, you knew what was going to happen. So you're dreading the whole time that this thing's going to unfold and it's going to be really, really, really ugly and really bad. And that's what, again, that's a testament to this movie's writing. Yes, it's ugly and it's tough to watch, but that doesn't make it a bad movie. In my mind, it made me feel something. That something wasn't good, but it, you know, it made me feel something real, and I appreciate the movie for that.
Well, what's interesting to me is I think of, like, I don't know, recent rape examples in movies or TV, and my mind goes to Game of Thrones. So potential spoilers, I guess, for Game of Thrones, but there's been rape depicted on that show before. And yes, it's a horrible thing to show, but it's usually not rooted in, like, I don't know, like super emotion for me. Like, I'm like, oh, they're showing a rape. That's terrible. That, you know, obviously is not a good thing. What's interesting about the way this movie approaches it is it's not just like, hey, here's some drunk guys and they go out and find this random girl and they rape her. Like, we get to see this girl in a loving relationship with her boyfriend, and, you know, they're staying in like this shared trailer that the guys stay in at this drilling site or whatever it was, right? And they're all supposed to be gone for the weekend. And so they're having this loving moment, and all of a sudden all these guys come back and they're drunk, you know, they're violent when they're drunk, I guess. They're rowdy, starting fights. And John Bernthal plays the boyfriend. And so not only, you know, is the girl raped, which is terrible, it's awful, it's so hard to watch, but what even adds more to that is we're watching John Bernthal get the shit kicked out of him, and they're like holding his arms behind his back, like he's having to watch this happening. Like, it even takes it up like another level, like you're seeing some of it through his eyes. And, you know, finally, you know, she is able to get away, and he's like, run, like, just leave. And so she busts out into the night, you know, and there's sort of this message about like what a strong woman she is and what a warrior she is to run 6 miles, you know, barefoot. All true. I think that's all fantastic. But I think this movie handles the rape in a way that feels real, and it feels very grounded and rooted in real emotion, as opposed to the desensitized layer of like, oh, I'm watching like the 5th rape, you know, in the last 3 months on TV or movies. Does that make sense?
No, this was a scene that, okay, this is going to be weird, but bear with me. The actual depiction of the rape, which is if there's someone that's like, you know, not comfortable with watching this movie and kind of knowing about this, I think that is absolutely fair, you know, regardless of the quality, you know, the quality of the script or kind of whatever we're recommending. Like, that is a hard thing, I think, for anyone to watch, especially survivors. So I want to make sure that that's out there. But while the segment itself is, the sexual assault itself is fairly short in terms of like, it's not played out over an extended period of time, as we've seen in some of these movies. The buildup and the tension and everything leading up to it, kind of the assault that happens beforehand, and the aftermath, like all of that feels so, like you said, grounded and so real. It's an uncomfortable scene, and it's an intentionally uncomfortable scene. It's supposed to make you not feel good about yourself, because this is a terrible thing to have to watch. And the fact that we weren't desensitized, that we're able to watch it and empathize and to just feel like disgust, I think is a credit to the filmmaking here, because that's what needs to be depicted. Yeah. If you're gonna show that, don't stylize it, don't make it, you know, fun or funky or whatever, you know, like that, you know, like, show it for the despicable act that it is.
Yeah, and the thing that's brilliant about the way that the movie, it's tough to describe scenes or a movie that depicts such a horrific rape as brilliant, but the way the movie portrays, sets this up to impact you is, you know, the cops go to this trailer where we think something bad's going to happen. The FBI agent knocks on the door, and you think something bad's going to happen, and then all of a sudden the door opens and now it's the victim. It's the rape murder victim. It's kind of a flashback. It jumps right to a flashback at that moment, and it took my breath away because, like, first of all, I didn't expect it. Secondly, you're like, oh shit, this is not only was it tense before, it just like stepped up another level of tenseness, and jumped into that flashback of how the rape and murder actually happens. And that was awful. And the other thing I want to mention is this movie doesn't flinch away from the rape violence or the violence, but gun violence. It does not flinch. It doesn't stylize the gun violence. There's no Idris Elba like freaking, reloading his gun in midair and like, crescendoing music. This is just a flat out violent gunfight in the middle of the snow between, the FBI, the local police, and some bad dudes. And it was very impactful. If I don't know, man, if all gun violence in movies was portrayed in a more realistic way, showing the blood, showing the hurt, showing the violence of a gunshot, maybe guns wouldn't be as big a deal if it wasn't as romanticized as it is.
Oh God, that scene where Elizabeth Olsen is like up there at the door, like after the flashback or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like we switch back to her, she's at the door, she's knocking. All of a sudden there's a gun blast through the door. Like you don't even see them firing. She gets like blown back off the porch. Thank God she's wearing a bulletproof vest, but like I gasped out loud. Like that just swept me off my feet right along with her.
And let's even talk about that because, like, I think in a lot of movies we would have seen the bulletproof vest, like she would have gone down for a bit and then she would have gotten up, kind of going like, okay, now I'm back in this. Like that shot, like the vest saved her life, barely. Like she was down for the count and quickly hospitalized after that.
Right.
The gunfire in this, there is a brutal finality whenever a gun is fired in this film. You don't have like people like ducking and covering and like flying through the air and any of that stuff. Like someone gets shot, that's usually it.
Right.
And again, it fits with just how biting and how brutal not this world that they're in, because that's not the way I want to put it, but this circumstance that they've all found themselves in is.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of veer away a little bit about, I don't know, do we want to talk about controversy around this?
I think that we should. Absolutely. Go for it, Jim, for sure.
I don't know how to set this up other than to say there was a thread on Twitter involving a kind of a friend of the show and a colleague of ours who reviewed this movie reviewed this movie, and was then attacked on Twitter, verbally or Twitter attacked, for praising the movie, because in the mind of the people doing the attacking, this movie, who, by the way, I don't think actually saw the movie, which really infuriates me to some level. They attacked the reviewer because he saw the movie, and he's a First Nations guy, right? This is a First Nations guy who saw the movie, appreciated the movie, wrote about the movie, and then was attacked because he even went to see a movie that in the attacker's eye kind of, I think, portrayed or maybe glorified rape of a Native or First Nations woman by a man. And it got pretty ugly. It's tough trying to defend your position to people who haven't even seen the movie. It's got to be a rough thing. And so, yeah, this movie has kind of stirred up a little controversy just on the basis of its subject matter. It's the rape murder subject matter, and also violence against women, and also violence against in particular First Nations women, minority women. So yeah, there's that controversy out there, and it's rough to see. You don't know whether to jump in defense or, you know, I don't know. It's rough.
And I've chosen the opposite tact in that.
Yeah.
Like, in that, you know, I think that I don't think there's any word or words that you can say in a situation like that that will fix things. And it's unfortunate because I think in the abstract, if I were to say, is there a problem in film as a whole, with the glorification of rape and sexualization of women, and the idea of women serving as in the kind of the woman in the refrigerator trope, which basically means like a woman's role in a film is to die or be injured so that the male character can feel bad about it and move forward. These are very real things, and there very much needs to be conversation about these types of things, and these tropes need to die out, and we need to have more films with more diverse representation. The problem is I think that we've sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater in this particular circumstance, and I apologize for babies or bathwater fans if that offended you.
Here come the tweets, Will.
Yeah, but this particular film shows, again, like, it does not. The film does not glorify sexual assault. It shows it as a disgusting act, and at the same time, even though she is murdered in the film, it venerates her. Like, we get to see sort of some of her, even though it's through flashback, we get to see some of the tenacity that she showed in the acts, in the moments afterward. And I think that there's something that's important about that. And I think it's also important that we have films. Again, the other reason this film is so important is that it is about this issue of these missing and murdered Native women, an issue that most people probably are not going to have heard about before this. And hopefully this helps in some way. This is also a great opportunity for, again, Native actors to get a chance to play roles that aren't just again, like mystic stereotypes or, you know, whatever the fuck that was in Suicide Squad. Like, this is a very delicate, nuanced, complicated movie. And if someone says they don't want to see it because of those things, I have no problem with that at all. But also the fact, you know, as someone who has seen it and knowing the person that reviewed it, knowing their thoughts on it and the things that he's been through with his family as they pertain to the subject matter, like, his is a voice that I very much respect in terms of what this film depicts.
Right. One of the other things that, in terms of that was kind of wrapped around this controversy, was the fact that, you know, and I kind of struggle with this myself a little bit. I have to rationalize it. Is that the movie depicts violence against First Nations people, but the heroes in the movie, arguably, are two white people, and there's this whole kind of pushback against the representation of, like, the presentation of, like, white savior, I guess is the term, in this movie. And I struggle with it because it is the case in this movie. I don't think it's overt. I think the white savior, and at least in terms of Jeremy Renner in this movie, is a very close ally to the Native people in this movie. Obviously, he's not coming in really as a white savior. He's part of the community, although he's not Native himself. It's a kind of a blurry line for me, and I can see where some people might initially have that reaction, but I would urge them to see the movie and then kind of think that idea through. Will, Brad, I don't know. What do you think of that?
Would this movie have been different if, instead of Jeremy Renner in this role, it was a First Nations actor?
Or a First Nations character, right?
Or First Nations character, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Would it have been different, you think?
Well, I think there would have been less opportunity for criticism, you know, whether it be fair or unfair. I think there would have been less opportunity for that criticism. But I think the opportunity is there. I don't feel it's fair to heap that criticism on this movie, the script, or these characters.
How about you, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we're dealing with with this particular subject matter, there is this concept of like white saviorism, which again is a thing, and it's a thing that happens very
Yep.
frequently in film. And I don't want to defend that because that's not what I'm doing at all. But in this particular film, we have basically three different levels. We have people that are native peoples. We have Elizabeth Olsen, who is sort of the outsider, the person who, I more so than anyone, I think that she serves as sort of the outsider's lens of what's going on here in life, so that we can get, we can learn what life on the res is like through her eyes and the questions she asks. And the Jeremy Renner role plays the sort of a bridge between the two, which in and of itself could be insulting if done poorly. It's not. It's done tactfully.
Right.
And I think that there's also a large percent. I mean, I can only talk. I can only speak to my experiences in Oklahoma. Every single one of the native peoples in up my family tree ended up marrying a Caucasian, and so that's my experience has been a native and white pairing all through my life. So this rang very, very, very true to me, seeing that like his relationship was through his marriage / divorce, and kind of the ties that he has there. So that rings true. That rings very true.
Nice. So here's my thought. And I don't know, maybe this is going to get me in trouble. I don't know, but I think if you had it be like a tribe member, right, or a First Nations character in that role, it would lose some of the ability to draw in like non-native audience. I think that the Jeremy Renner character, having been married to a First Nations, having a child with her, like that's his family. I think he's like, Will, that bridge term you use is a really apt one here. I think he's a bridge or a conduit for people who are maybe not part of that community to maybe get their feels going, to be able to relate. Because whether you're part of that nation or this nation or whatever, everyone can relate to wanting a family. Everyone can maybe relate to having loved ones, and what if something happened to those loved ones? So, if a decision was made to cast a Caucasian actor and set it up like that to be the bridge, in a way, I think it accomplishes kind of what some of this movie is trying to accomplish in general, and that's bring some visibility and some attention to issues that I think, for the most part, don't get that attention and visibility. Whether that's whitewashing or whether that's a strategic mechanism to bring that. I mean, I don't know how that decision was made, but I see it as effective and tactfully done here.
It's also a sign of where we are, not necessarily a sign of where we want to be, because I think that, like, if I had my like magic wish making machine, if I could just like, blink my eyes and materialize something into existence, like I would love to see more, and again, not just native peoples, but just like minorities in general, given the opportunity to be leading frontmen people, as opposed to just the friend or the token or the villain or something like that, which is, I think we're slow. I think as of right now, we're starting to see a shift in some of that. We are starting to see a few more films that are taking some, I don't want to say chances, but even something that we didn't enjoy as much, like The Dark Tower. Just there was a lot of controversy about them casting Idris Elba in the lead role, and it was an inspired choice. It was a good choice. It was one of the few good choices that movie made. I want to see more of that. Would that have worked here? I personally think that it could have worked here. I think that if you had someone else here, I think it would have been equally as good a movie. I don't know that it would have had the same distribution, obviously, and that's kind of the double-edged sword of where we're at right now.
Right.
I want to see more roles like that, and it is going to take some filmmakers sort of taking some chances, making some films. I think it's going to take a few more Moonlights, I think. Just those types of films that like don't really have any like crazy marquee actors in the super lead roles, that are all minority, and all given it, and it's both critically and audience appreciated. I think it's going to take a few more of those before we start to see more of these films taking similar chances, but I long for that day. But in this particular role, I don't think it hurt anything to have Renner in that place. I don't think it would have hurt anything to have someone else in that role. I don't know. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are all very firmly agreed. This is a really, really great film. Definitely get out and see it. I want to give a quick shout out to our friend Adam, who just joined the show a little bit ago. Hey, Adam, welcome. We actually saw this movie with Adam, and I think the last movie he saw was La La Land. Doesn't see very many movies. And he said this was a very powerful one for him. And I think, you know, if any of you are still listening at this point, you haven't seen it yet, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to see it. That might be in a good opinion to keep in mind too. Like, you know, even if you don't see a lot of movies, a quiet movie like this that may not even be on your radar can be super powerful, can be super great. So follow Adam's example. Go see this movie if you aren't going to follow our example, which we're okay with. You know, not everyone likes our opinion, although if you're listening to the show, we hope you find something to work with.
It was kind of funny. We you know, Adam's a new Bear friend of ours, and we kind of, he's not, he sees movies, obviously, but he probably doesn't see as many as we do. And so we decided to go see this movie. He wanted to hang out and kind of come with us. I'm like, okay. He's like, what's this movie? We're sitting in the chair in the movie theater. He's like, what's this movie about? I'm like, it's about Jeremy Renner. He plays this tracker guy, and he helps solve a rape murder. That's all I know about it. And he says, okay, I'll go see it. And after the movie, I asked him what he thought, and he says, I don't know. He was kind of stunned, I think, by the movie.
Yeah.
And I really do think he appreciated the movie for what it was. I think he just had to process it. At various levels to figure out, you know, if he liked it or not. And I hope he did.
Can I say kudos to Adam? Like, that particular story that you just told me, like, of someone going to the theater and saying, all right, I'm going to watch this. Now, what's it about? I think there is a certain, I feel like sort of we've trained ourselves in sort of over preparing ourselves for movies. And I'm not talking like us collectively, but I'm talking about like, you know, people as a whole. Like, okay, I'm going to go see it, but I need to go find out what 3 of my friends said and what's its Rotten Tomatoes, and am I, you know, and yes, like, you know, films are commodities, and it's okay to kind of like, you know, shop sort of based on like what, you know, you think might fit your score. But I think there is something absolutely glorious about just taking a chance on something and just letting a film maybe surprise you. We all took a chance on a film 2 years ago called The Gift that was not on our radars at all, that we all were just like, I don't think this is going to be something we're interested in, and we all ended up being blown away by it. And so yeah, kudos to Adam for taking a chance on the film. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Indeed. Well, guys, we're running long in the tooth here. Why don't we go ahead and move on to some quick plugs, and we'll look to wrap things up. I want to call out what we're reviewing next week on the show, but I'm going to do it now so that you have a chance to go see it in theaters in preparation. You guys, believe it or not, Close Encounters of the Third Kind is 40 fucking years old, and it is in re-release in theaters this week. So if you get a chance, if you haven't seen Close Encounters for a while, they've gone back, they've remastered it. It looks amazing. I watched a trailer for it today. We're really excited to talk about this film. It's one of my favorites. Jim, I think we bought this on Blu-ray a couple months ago.
It's somewhere.
Yeah.
It's somewhere.
We'll find, you know, we'll go see it in theaters and watch it. But definitely we're excited to talk about it next week. So if you get a chance, go see it in theaters this weekend. There's not really a lot coming out this weekend, unfortunately. I think Tulip Fever is the other big release here, and I don't know. So anyway, check it out. Go see it. Join us next week for our Close Encounters discussion. Will, what have you got?
You know, we looking over my list here. Yeah, this is a perfect one. I think you guys already talked about this one around South by Southwest time, but I recently got HBO Now because I wanted to be able to watch Game of Thrones
Legally?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. Well, but most importantly, after I got that and was watching my episodes, I was like, I wonder if there's anything else that HBO has released that I haven't watched that I need to. And as I was going through the documentaries, I came across two. Beware the Slender Man, which I wasn't super jazzed about, but the other one which I liked was Mommy, Dead, and Dearest.
Yeah.
Up by Southwest. So I got a chance to catch up with this one, and it was interesting because I think we came at it like the story, I think, in different angles. Because am I correct? Was this the first time you guys had heard the story of Gypsy Rose?
I had never heard the story. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
There was like this really long article on like one of those like 4-page like super like in-depth articles on some magazine site like a while back, where I was just reading through all that, and it was just going through kind of all the piece by piece and the pound by pound. So I knew the story very well, but what I didn't have was any visuals to associate with it, because they kept saying like, and she had this like to tell you the story about this one. It's about this oh gosh, it's a documentary about this woman is murdered. That's the first thing that happens in the documentary, so I think I can say that just fine. She's murdered, and in the investigation, you find out that the primary suspect might have been culpable because of some things that had happened to her in her life. That's super big. But like they describe like the girl's like voice and some of her mannerisms in the article, but that's like, and so I was able to visualize them the way you could read a book. But this was a documentary. I got to see footage of Gypsy Rose. I got to hear her talk, and you get to see in that particular one this particular documentary was more recent than the article I had read too, which means that like even Gypsy's disposition on the whole thing was a lot more evolved, like in those little interstitials where it cut to her. This is a really cool little documentary about a very bizarre case that almost feels too weird to actually be a real thing that happened. But this is a documentary. This is a real thing that happened. It's called Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. It's a bizarre little tale of murder and kind of the circumstances that cause it. And it's on HBO Now or HBO Go or whatever you stream for HBO, and it's pretty cool. Check it out.
I'm glad it finally got released. That one stood out to me. I mean, nothing groundbreaking filmmaking wise. The story, like you said, is just so bizarre.
God, yeah.
It's like, I can't believe this is happening, or this actually happened. And I actually felt something at the end of the movie. Like,
definitely.
It's a tragedy. So, yeah.
Good plug, Will. Absolutely. All right, Jim, close us out for plugs. What do you got?
I am going to plug a movie that is just now in its soft release, but I saw it at South by. I know, Will, you've seen it. Brad, I hope to see this one with you if you have any interest at all. It's a movie called Patty Cakes. It's basically a story about an aspiring female rapper from New Jersey, Patricia Dombrowski, aka Patty Cakes, who is fighting an unlikely quest for glory in New Jersey as a white young woman, overweight woman who's trying to become a rap artist. And this movie is really kind of it's one of these crowd-pleasing, uplifting movies. Got some great, I think some great music. And I'm not a rap fan, but I really got into some of the music. It's kind of a blend of rap and rock, which I really liked. By a kind of, I think, a fairly new name in directing and writing, Jeremy Jasper. And it's got an amazing breakout performance by this actress named Danielle McDonald, who I don't know if you're going to hear anything more from her after this movie, but her performance in this movie is really something to see. Some great character work in this movie. Patty Cakes, $PATTICAKE is how it's spelled. So check it out if it's playing near you. It's in soft release, might not be everywhere yet, but in a week or two it should be.
All right.
So great plug. Just my luck. I mean, I got a chance to see it the other day, and they were giving out shirts with it.
Oh, no!
But So I got these like this cool Boss Bitch shirt.
Nice.
Hold on. It's a medium. So I've got this badass shirt that I probably, like, if you cut me in half, I could probably wear this shirt. So we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do. Like, we're thinking of maybe like Scott. I saw it with my boyfriend Scott, and it's like he was over the moon about this one. So we're thinking about taking it, like maybe putting it on a little canvas and putting it on the wall or something. I don't know, but
I have another idea. I do
that?
this sometimes with T-shirts that I get. You could make it into a throw pillow for your couch.
Oh my God, yes. And honestly, and it's a Boss Bitch. It's a Boss Bitch. That'd be a really cool pillowcase. Yeah, good suggestion, Brad.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody. We collectively want to thank everybody for tuning in with us this week. Those of you who are with us in the live chat, Steve and Adam and everybody else, JP, it was so great to see you guys. Thanks so much for joining. Those of you listening via digital tape delay in iTunes and Stitcher Radio, glad to have you guys with us as well. Don't forget, you can always, if you're listening to the audio only, but you want to see our smiling faces and some of the cool stuff, like that T-shirt Will just held up that you are not able to see because you're listening audio only. Don't forget, you can look up Movie Bears Podcast on YouTube and watch the video version of the show. Steve says he hearts us. Steve, we heart you too. In fact, you give us a heart on. So just wanted to let you know that, Steve. Hey, guys, just as we wrap with finality here, Jim, if folks want to interact with you online, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter mainly at JJP Out West, all one word, or on Facebook at under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Awesome. Will, how about you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Whatever Cove. I'm on Facebook, William Lindis. Just shoot me a message and say hi. I'm on Letterboxd. Just search for me there, William Lindis as well. It's a great place for people to log and discuss films that they've seen. So, yeah, check me out there as well.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at iBradPro or on Facebook under the name Brad Harris. It's spelled out on screen if you're watching on YouTube. I'm the Brad Harris that has Bears, Chubs, and Chasers as mutual friends. I am not the gun nut from Montana. So if you click on that Brad Harris and you see a bunch of guns and mountains, it ain't me. Plus, he has a different face and he's like, I don't know, 200 pounds skinnier than I am. I'm pretty sure you can tell. In any event, guys, this has been a blast. I love chatting movies with you. I'm so glad we get a chance to do this every week. Next week, with Monday being a holiday, I know, guys, we may want to talk if we want to record the holiday night. I know my dad and sister will be in town. It'll be our last night with them, so I don't know if we want to switch to Tuesday or something. We'll figure it out. But we'll definitely let you guys know on Facebook if it's going to be Monday or Tuesday, what route we go. Have a great holiday weekend if you're in the United States. If you're not in the United States, we love you. Have a great weekend. Anyway, once you get there, goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.